Hey, everybody. This is Kelly Nielsen, the Grief Guru. And on this channel, we explore all things grief. What is grief? How does it feel? But most importantly, tips, tools, and strategies for how to move through grief to get back to a place of peace, joy, and excitement for your future. And I am so thrilled today because in this video, we're going to be exploring how you can embrace and use creativity to help process grief, sorrow, sadness, all the really heavy emotions that come with loss and grieving. We are going to talk to an artist, a fabulous woman, Monique Sarkisian. Hopefully I got that right. She has the best last name. She's going to share with us her tips and strategies for how to do this well. But first of all, Monique, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's always a pleasure to be with you. We really are able to connect all of our ideas, and I get so much from just talking with you. So thank you.
Yeah, we're a really great complement to one another. I love working with Monique because she is the yin to my yang for wherever I am structured and have the like system and roadmap. Monique has all of the fluid, kind of out here stuff that I have literally no scope for. So she brings so much value to our community and to our membership and all the things that we have going on. And so Monique, for the folks watching the video that don't know you or aren't familiar with your story, why don't you share a little bit about that with us?
Well, unfortunately, I joined the Grief Club. I've gone through grief before, but I lost my 16-year-old daughter almost 3 years ago to depression and suicide. And it was extremely devastating, like everybody's grief story is devastating. And it stripped everything off that was unnecessary from my life. I can be grateful for that. All the things that I was consumed with at the time just kind of fell away and being not important. And the two things that I had left that were basically still intact were my relationship with God, which I was holding very tightly to as something I could count on, and my ability to make art. Mm-hmm. And so those two things were really what I had a foundation for, and God used my creativity, showed me how to use my creativity to work through the deep feelings that I have. I'm a deep feeler. It's, I've always been this way, and it's probably not a surprise that I decided to become a visual artist. There were a lot of other job vocations that I wasn't as well suited for. But, when you're going through grief and you have so many things going on in your life, there's the planning of services, there's all the other family members reaching out to you, or they need to work through it, you need to work through it. There's so many things that go on. There's all the unfinished things that you have with that person. There's just so many layers, as you guys know, if you're in grief, or in that journey, shall we say. So I was not that connected with people who would always say, whatever grief support group I would go to, oh, write a journal. And I was not interested in writing words in a journal. Mm. And part of it was a little bit of resistance I was having to writing and my penmanship and some other issues, but it just really didn't connect with me. And being a visual person, I processed everything visually. So I, had lots of different ways that I did, but basically I kept a visual journal, and whether it was individual works or little sketches, just whenever I could free my mind, I needed to stay out of what I called either the roller coaster of grief or the washing machine spin cycle, where you felt okay for a little bit maybe, and then you'd feel grief coming, the grief bully come at you, and you would get taken back down under the, the big wash mode, and then you would just have to wait till it subsided, and then you would be able to climb back up again, and you would be like, is this what the rest of my life is going to be like? So I really needed to be able to empty out the buildup of the day, what was in here and in here, and that's what I used my art for.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing. And, you know, it is so personal for everybody. You know, everybody's built a different way. Everybody experiences loss a different way. And so, because I'm one of those journalers, I have like notebooks filled with things. And so I'm definitely a journal person. So I so appreciate that you are here representing for those who don't want to journal. But I want to ask, from someone who is not artistic, not like, I don't claim to be super creative, at least in that way, like, what are some ways that I can engage? And for those of us who aren't, you know, naturally gifted or inclined that way, like, what are a couple of things that we could do to kind of embrace the same sentiment, to use art and creativity to help us with those really overwhelming feelings?
Well, I believe that creativity is for everybody, and you don't have to, it's not the place to judge yourself. So everybody just needs to kind of put that aside. And when you were little, you all did something. You drew, you loved making art. Generally, children love that. And at some point where they start getting negative criticism from people, or they start getting very self-conscious, sometimes then they decide to put that away, or they don't believe that they're creative. But it's really your birthright. It's really something you inherited as a human, as a child of God. This is, you've been given something. And so anything from, like, if you don't want to put a brush to canvas, you don't have to. You can just take a regular pencil like you have anywhere in your possession. Or I don't recommend working on the computer so much, because there's this physical aspect to actually moving your hand around, and a physical attention from the paper or whatever surface you're working on and what you're holding in your hand, that you get a physical release from that. And you don't get that on the computer. You might get a little bit of mental clarity, but it's not the same thing. I guess that's why people tell you to write in your journal or whatever. It's just kind of like emptying out your thoughts. So anyway, some simple things that I did, especially in the beginning, were I was really afraid in the beginning that I was going to forget her. I was going to forget all the things about her, that eventually her memory would fade. And I was very fortunate that a friend of mine, who unfortunately had also lost a child, she lost her daughter, she said to me, "You're not going to forget. You might think you're going to, but you're going to remember everything." I was so relieved, because I didn't want to, in addition to losing the physical body, losing the physical person, that in addition, everything was just going to disappear. Like, what was going to happen?
That's such a good word. Like, I have to just interject there, because I think so many people stay stuck in grief because they feel like if they move on from the sadness and the sorrow, that they're somehow going to forget, or that if they're not consumed with thoughts all the time and upsetting thoughts all the time, that they're going to somehow lose the memory of their loved one. So that is so good right there. Like, if nothing else comes from this video, can we just assure you, like, you're not going to forget. Your loved one is woven into the fiber of your being, and there's so many memories, like, you are not going to forget. So just, you have permission to heal and take care of yourself and move on. So good.
So I just lost my thought.
I'm sorry, I completely interjected.
No, well, that was good. I remembered something else in there. Okay. So in the not forgetting, and I would just draw little things about her, like her favorite animal, like she loves seals. So I would do drawings of seals, because one of the last nights that we had together, she was like, "Mom, read me a story." She was 16. "Mom, reading me a story." And so I took one of her books and I made up things about, what was going on in the book. And she was just happy. It was just a very sweet memory that we have. So rather than, like you said, getting stuck, and that was the thought that I was like, oh yeah, I got to say something about that. The getting stuck. Grief is a bully, and it's very tricky, because what happens is, you're all of a sudden catapulted into this place that you don't want to be in, and you're surrounded by grief and all the hammering of all these negative things going on around you from the grief. And it winds up, I asked my grief counselor, is grief a friend or a foe? And she said to me, that's a really good question. She didn't answer the question, because I was definitely thinking foe, because I really didn't feel good being in grief at all. It was very debilitating to me. And so I pondered, prayed about, her response, her non-response, or her. And I found it to be very, one of the things about getting stuck in grief is that you wind up taking on the negative scenario around it because it's all you have. And like you said, where you kind of like afraid that if you let go of that because it has replaced the life before, you wind up kind of allowing it to come alongside you. But that's a false idea, and that is the thing that keeps you stuck. And back to the activities is, so I would draw everything, that I could remember about her to preserve the memories. Like, she loved baking, she'd make cinnamon rolls, she'd make pumpkin bread, she was cooking for people, taking huge things into school. And, even the shoes that we bought, we went to Italy together 2 months before that. And so all the things about that and the sweetness, like I really felt like I needed to preserve the positive so that the negative and the circumstances around her death and, I was the person that found her. So I had all that negative stuff, all those images that I wish I didn't have and things like that. And I'm visual. So yeah. I need to let go of that. But, when the grief bully comes, the grief bully reminds you of all the negative stuff as much as possible. The grief bully wants you to stay stuck. And so I was like, well, how do I get out of this? So I have a lesson, preserving the positive. It's basically preserving the person and remembering all the positive things. And then on the converse side, when you have negative emotions, or if there were some unresolved issues between you, because when I lost my dad, I loved my father, but he was kind of an explosive personality, and we had weathered many, many storms. And so remembering the person and not denying that there were things that were not perfect about that person.
Yeah.
But, or say the relationship wasn't resolved, and when they passed, you had regret, or or maybe they were being pretty nasty to you when they passed, because that can happen too. And then what do you do with that? How do you move forward in that situation? So even if there's negative things, you can do a drawing or whatever art materials you have, but you can just, pencil and paper is fine, computer paper is fine. I try to make things so that anybody can feel comfortable with whatever they're doing. So then you would make a drawing or put together something of the negative things. But then, you can draw a big X over it. You have to resolve it by forgiving them. You forgive them, you lay that down. If you're a Christian, you take it to the cross, really. So that's how you really get rid of it, but then you draw a big X over it, because it's a sign that you've resolved on your end that relationship and that disparity. So, we deal with the positive as much as we can, but we can't deny the negative, because it will always be back there lurking, and the grief bully feeds off of that stuff.
Yeah, that's so good. And I'm so glad you addressed that, because when you were talking about, wanting to focus on the positive thoughts, and I'm like, well, what do you do with the negative ones? Like, is there a place for that? And so it's so great to give physical expression to the positive and to hang on to those and hang those up and focus on those, but to also give room for whatever negative guilt, shame, anger, whatever you have going on, to express that and then be done with it. That it can be a literal physical sign of you letting go, forgiving, whatever that looks like for you. So good. And I love that it can literally just be grabbing a pencil and a paper. And, are you a fan of time limit? I'm a big time limit person. So I'm so structured. I would be like, okay, we're going to spend 30 minutes, you know, and just map this out. I'm guessing you don't do structure like that. Mostly artistic people are like,
My brain,
until it's done.
yeah, my brain is a little less structured, but I do sometimes do that. I really do. Sometimes my processing takes a little bit longer. That's where the time, my version of time might be a little bit differently, because I mull over things, I kind of absorb ideas, and then when I'm ready to do them, I do them. Or if I have a deadline, I will work with the deadline. Sometimes the deadline will help. If you're creatively stifled because somebody has been negative to you in the creative realm, like I grew up with an art teacher that was really not
encouraging.
not encouraging. And so, you know, a lot of people at that point put aside their creativity. So you can give yourself a time limit of 5 minutes. You know, it doesn't have to be 30 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. Sometimes I give myself a short deadline of, like, say 15 minutes, and then I'm enjoying myself. So I'll give myself permission to work longer. So you should work with whatever you feel comfortable with that's not getting in your way. And if nothing comes up, you can always put it aside. And say, you know what, I'll put a note in my calendar next Thursday, like a week from now, I'll take a look at it.
Revisit it. Yeah.
Right.
Give yourself, grace, permission, patience, all of those things to go at your own pace and your own speed, but just keep moving forward. That's the biggest thing. Like, I so appreciate this conversation. I so appreciate your contribution. And for those of you watching, Monique is one of our fantabulous coaches in Grief Relief Nation who comes in and shares lessons similar to this and much deeper. The idea being, we are going to give you every tool and resource you could possibly need in order to accelerate your movement through grief. And you can use all the tools, some of the tools, whatever fits for you. But the point is, we're going to give you a variety of different ways to navigate through grief and get back to loving life, right? Because that is entirely what it's all about. So thank you so much, Monique, for your contribution to the community and for just linking arms with us. And I know you're doing a bunch of great stuff on your own as well, and working with other people in addition to the work that you do with us. So just thank you so much for lending your talents. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And helping people work through things like me is, it's so important. I didn't have anybody. I know you found limited resources, so we're happy to share what we have learned so that you're not back where we used to be.
Absolutely.
Where I used to be,
so they can do it faster, right? Like, that's the idea.
Right.
When you have coaches and mentors and people who've been through it, you can go through faster. So for more information on the community, there'll be a link below this video. But aside from that, until next time, guys, we'll see ya.